The recording you're about to listen to is me describing why I believe that human beings are responsible for all of the supernatural, paranormal, and metaphysical phenomena that we experience in our lives in the here and now. It was recorded on February 24th, 2019 in Hangzhou, China. Hello, my name is Hakeem Alexander, and you're listening to Hypno-Athletics, Exercising Your Mind.
Well, here's an interesting takeaway. I mentioned this to you before, but this is something you should really look into. I am convinced now from the research that I've done that pretty much all of the phenomena that people experience in the world, all the way to religious experiences and demonic possession, and all the phenomena that people experience all the world are due to the concept of what I will put under the umbrella of the term Tulpa, T-U-L-P-A. And a Tulpa is a concept from Tibetan mysticism that simply means a mind-made body. And this is very interesting because, in my opinion, from my perspective, it explains everything. That all of the phenomena that people are having are basically creating these tulpas, where you're creating these thought forms that often can manifest physically, and they appear to take on a mind of their own and have their own entity, but someone created this. We're all creating stuff, and sometimes they get away from us. And it's like a circuit, like a loop running. And so that's why a lot of hauntings, when people see them and things like that, they do the same thing over and over again. And it's interesting because these thought forms can take on such intricacy that sometimes they respond, like they have programmed response. It's almost like an algorithm to different stimuli. So, for example, when different people, certain energy that they bring, the tulpa will respond in a certain way, and so it seems like it has an intelligence and a life of its own, but it's simply because a lot of times people that separate these things from themselves, and a lot of times it's unconsciously, they're also unconsciously creating an entire neural network of information for these things to operate. And some people do it intentionally. They create these mind-made bodies or tulpas on their own. But the point that I'm making is I actually have gotten away from the belief that these disembodied entities are spirits from the afterlife coming back to haunt people. The afterlife is, and what happens to people when we die, I'm convinced for now that we don't have time for this shit anymore. That people aren't coming back to do hauntings or fucking around with stuff. Like you get into a completely different level of consciousness, and although it may exist, they're not bothering to come back and interact with this shit. Once people die, they're like, oh my god, like, why would I bother going back to that place? But we here on this plane, we're creating that stuff, and it seems like we're creating that. It seems like there are demons, and for all intents and purposes, they are demons. But another perspective I have on demons is simply that they're all of the negative traits and emotions and bad tulpas that people are creating in the world, and some people are doing it intentionally, and they're playing off of and using that belief system that people have about demons and disembodied entities and spirits as one form of control in this whole grid of control. It helps to perpetuate a belief system that helps to keep a lot of people in check. But it's very interesting that ever since I began to have this perspective, all of those things went away, and they have no more control. Completely gone when I started to realize, oh, those are just thought forms that appear to have a life of their own, and they appear to come from the other worlds, but these are all fictions that are operating in this physical plane because people create them. People start having these ideas. They start reading certain books about ghosts, or they start getting scared about stuff, and the mind starts making these things up, especially through like optical illusions that happen to people. A lot of times what the mind does is that when it doesn't understand something, it creates a story behind, like, why am I seeing this thing that it looks like a body or a ghost, and then those things then build upon themselves, and sometimes they detach from people, or people intentionally detach these stories, and then people write books about it, and there's movies now, and that's why you even have like alien abduction stories, and nobody ever has any evidence of this stuff. It's happening to people, but again, they're just simply mind-made by people. We're the creators of the aliens. We human beings are the creators of the ghosts. We're the ones that are doing this. A lot of time, it's interesting too that there's a lot of evidence that a lot of poltergeists and a lot of hauntings are actually attributable to people who it's happening to. There'll be like a child or somebody who's mentally disturbed, or anything that they are actually creating these effects because they either had some emotional disturbance or something else that's going on. And it's been found by a lot of researchers that once they deal with a certain person, or they do a certain ritual, that's why sometimes exorcisms work, because you're dealing with the person who's actually creating it, and it's not the demon, but it seems like it. Like, there are a lot of people, for example, so in studying hypnosis, you'll find out that there are people who who have what's called dissociative personality disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder, and things like that. And some people have confused with schizophrenia. But where people have multiple personalities, whereas, for example, in one personality they could be a woman, and another one they're a little boy, another one they're, a man. And the interesting thing about that is that some people have demonstrated one person needs glasses, and when they shift to another personality, they have perfect eyesight. Or one person has diabetes, and when they shift into a different personality, they no longer have diabetes. Or it's even been demonstrated the mind is so powerful that you can put a quarter that's room temperature, a coin of any kind, on somebody's skin, and you talk to them and tell them that it's white hot or red hot with heat, and when you take it off, they'll have a burn mark on their skin. So the human body is interesting that it can move through states of disease and non-disease. You can have diabetes in one state and then be normal, have normal blood sugar in the other one. You can have perfect eyesight in one and then be nearly blind in another state. You can have a room temperature coin cause burns on the skin. And so anyway, those are just some interesting things to consider, even to the point where there was a doctor who used hypnosis, who this kid had elephantitis over almost all of his entire body, and he cleared up this dude's skin. No, it wasn't elephantitis. I'm sorry. It's another skin disorder. I don't remember what it is now. I actually wrote about it. Sometimes when I write things, I get it out of my mind. But so it's very interesting. Anyway, I'm still exploring that idea, but I just think it's fascinating. I'm not saying that it's the absolute truth and that it has to be even true, but it appears like that from my perspective, and especially the effects that it's had in my life, where I no longer have issues with any external entities like giving me a scare or even having any negative influence on me ever since I started looking at that perspective. So I think it's fascinating. And on the haunting of the hospital and the different places that you may go to and have these things happening, it's not necessarily that there were demons throwing those porcelain things around, or even demons in the normal sense of what people think they are, throwing a stretcher at Lausanne. Either your boyfriend at the time, he thought that there were demons, and so maybe even read stories about them and was doing rituals to try to conjure them. And when you do that, you actually do, because you're starting to read about their personalities, and you're reading about the powers that they have and the things that they can do, and so you create a tulpa for that. Or people who were at the hospital before, maybe there was somebody who was there, people who have mental conditions, and I'll just leave with this because I got to go do my thing, but Dr. Andrew Weil, in his book called The Natural Mind, talked about how to the same extent that, yes, I know, thank you, to the same extent that a negative psychotic person can be a burden to society, to that same extent a positive psychotic can be an asset, and that the National Institutes of Health would be the last American institution to realize the positive potential of psychosis. He said a potential so overwhelming that he's willing to say that psychotics are the evolutionary vanguard of our species because they have the ability to change reality simply by changing their mind. And so it's very interesting that if you're in a hospital and there are people who have that ability, whether it be negative or positive, they can be an asset or a burden, they have this ability to change reality by changing their mind. They can create tulpas so powerful and leave them because that's what they believe. That's my thesis about a lot of things that are happening, that we are creating them. And the more powerful of a creator you are, whether it's because you're psychotic or you're just a very highly skilled meditator, those are the things that are happening. All right.
Okay. See you later.
Off to class. Tulpa, T-U-L-P-A. Look that up, yeah.
And if you'll care to continue listening, what you're about to hear is the conversation that led into the previous recording you heard.
They just decided to stop funding the hospital.
So we have one of these things where people are messing around in the basement of a hospital in a psychiatric ward.
Yeah. And one of the nurses got shot. A doctor got shot.
Shot with a gun.
Yeah. And then just everybody, it was literally like everybody just decided to get up and leave. So the hospital was abandoned. Obviously, if they catch you there, then it's trespassing.
Right.
So you have to bribe the security guard to get in there. It's insane. Like.
But tell me what happened.
So
that's the part I want to know.
I went in, and there's no lights on, obviously, and this is like 12 o'clock in the evening, right? So there were no lights on. I went in. As I went in, Lazan was the only one with a flashlight. I didn't have a flashlight. The patient files and everything were lying around. So Lazan took the flashlight and she pointed to the floor to look at the patient files. And as she was busy with that, a light started going on in one of the hallways right across from me. I was standing like this, right? The hallway right there, a light went on. And when I looked, it looked like a piece of plastic because it was very dirty in there. So it looked like a piece of plastic hanging from one of the walls, right? On the left side. It looked like a piece of plastic. And when I looked again, there was a little girl. And she went like this. And she looked at me, and she went back.
So she was leaning, swinging from side to side.
Yeah. And then she went back again. It's like she was playing hide and seek with me. It's like she was playing hide and seek with me. And the third time she did it, she smiled. And when she smiled at me, I started freaking out and I ran. Right? So Rizwan didn't know what happened. I told her. She didn't believe me. And a while after that, we went back in again. They forced me to go back in again. I didn't want to go back in again. But we went in. So we are on the third floor. The third floor was the pediatric ward. As I walked in there, I started feeling sick. I really, really, really started feeling sick. It's like my feet was busy swelling.
Whoa.
I started getting nauseous. I started getting headaches. I started getting cravings. I can even remember what cravings were. It was freaking peanut butter and cheese sandwiches.
Interesting. Depending on what kind of cheese though you get, that could be quite delicious.
Yeah, well. So, and we were walking, and as we were going all deeper and deeper and deeper into the pediatric ward, I started feeling really, 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 really sick. And it was literally like something kicked me. Like when you're pregnant, something kicked me in my belly.
Well, I've never been pregnant.
Okay, well, I hope you've never been pregnant before, but I felt pregnant.
Wow.
And something kicked me. And as it kicked me, I screamed. And then I ran out again. I ran down the staircases, and I went to go stand outside. And all of them just decided, okay, well, screw her, we're going on, you know. So the one that's thrown with a stretcher.
Thrown.
Like something threw a stretcher at her.
Wow.
Like straight at her. And missed her head with like an inch. It was insane. And
Too bad those forces don't have better aim, huh?
too bad, right? Could have put me out of my misery. But now, as I think about it today, imagine whatever that was knew what was going to happen, and they were aiming because nothing happened to anybody else that was with us there that evening.
Well, you know, here's an interesting takeaway. I mentioned this to you before, but this is something you should really look into.